What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new episode of the Pro-Black Blurred Kingdom podcast. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about a few things all related to the very recent death of the creator of the popular anime series Yu-Gi-Oh! On top of talking about his death, I want to talk about a few things around the series since I was a very big fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! First of all, I want to talk about some of my favorites. So that may include duelists, that may include monsters, that may include all these other things that have to do with the series. And then at the end, I want to talk a little bit about the character Axel Brodie. And I want to talk about this fan fiction idea that I had for this character. Those of you who are anime fans, and specifically Yu-Gi-Oh fans from back in the day, you're probably aware at this point that the creator, whose name was Kazuki Takahashi, died on July the 4th of 2022 in Okinawa, Japan. He was 60 years old when he passed away. And as far as the cause of his death, the reports were that his body was discovered on that Wednesday of that week, floating off the coast of Nago. I don't know if I said that right, but Nago, off the coast of Okinawa Prefecture. According to the New York Times, Mr. Takahashi was traveling alone in Nago at a very popular vacation destination, as a matter of fact, and had apparently been snorkeling when he died of unknown causes. And this is what a Coast Guard spokesman said. I'll admit that beyond hearing about his death, I didn't really know much about the creator or his backstory, and this is certainly something that I researched literally when I found out about it. And to be honest, I'm not one who typically big ups individuals outside of black culture. And even within my own culture, I'm picky because we don't have effective leaders or those with enough integrity to put things on the line and be on code. But I do want to say this about what he created. I enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! For many of the same reasons that I enjoyed the Pokemon series, although the two are very different. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is kind of like Pokemon's foil in a way. It's a brand that is ultimately about monsters and the owners who use them. The two entities are different because Pokemon typically excels when it comes to portraying new games, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Excels typically when it comes to its shows. And unlike Pokemon, where the show is almost completely monster-centric and goes into integral details about their stats, attributes, and even more so that you can get attached to these monsters, Yu-Gi-Oh! Seems to be more focused on this dynamic of the relationships between the monsters and the card owners. It goes into detail about the backstories around the characters and actually tells a story that over the years has been intricate and in a lot of cases very dark too. The emphasis that's put on the trainer in Pokemon is nowhere near as detailed as the emphasis they put on the duelist in Yu-Gi-Oh! The reason I enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! And enjoyed it as a kid is because it gives you choices and a way to customize your own style. You have all these different monsters. The dual disc can be different in some cases. The characters have different gimmicks and personalities and all this other stuff. It allows me the element of customization and honing your own swagger. If you like to use bug cards, they're out there. If you like to use loony characters, they're out there. If you like to use sea creatures, they're out there. If you like to use dragons, that's out there as well too. It was fun and interesting to see these different monsters and different attacks, and ultimately one crucial thing that many won't talk about, the strategy and critical thinking that it took to be able to duel and to overcome fighting one's opponent. That's what really made the series very interesting. And that's what I really appreciated about what he created. Outside of the darker element, outside of that though, it presented a darker element than Pokemon. It wasn't actually much of a young kid show, if we're being real, because it required intense strategy and it took a lot of critical thinking for an individual to be able to follow what was going on when you watch these duels. Although I liked the show, I will admit I never really collected the cards or anything like that growing up. You know, I had a few homeboys who did, but that was never really my thing personally. To be honest, I didn't even quite get into the series much until my preteen years, and even then I wasn't a die-hard fan. But I will say, I remember there was this one time though when I was in college. I think I was in my junior year, or I was either going into my junior year or I was into my junior year, and I stayed in my apartment for the summer. I didn't have much to do when I was done with class because I was taking summer classes up at school. So what I would do is I would go home and I would get on my computer and start watching shows that I had not been able to catch up on, especially with me being really busy at school. So let me just tell y'all, family, when I tell you that I went through and I binged Yu-Gi-Oh! The show, I literally watched the first 3 series. I watched Yu-Gi-Oh! The original, I watched Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and then I went through and I watched Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds all the way through. I was hooked. And further, that's when I realized that this man had created one hell of an iconic masterpiece of a show. I can't deny that. Hell, now that I think about it, going into that next year, I believe I even started watching a small bit of Zexal as well too. So, you know, I know I'm a bit off topic though, talking about the creator and how he passed, but I just wanted to say Yu-Gi-Oh! And DBZ were iconic for me because before watching those two, I was really not into anime like that for real. And to be honest with you, I'm still not a big anime head, I won't lie, but let's just say that as a creator myself, it did help me develop a lot of my own ideals and things that I may want to create in the future. I even have a few anime ideas that I have shelved for a little bit until I can get my bread up and get a real artist to bring some of this stuff to life. I honestly have the likes of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon and other popular animes like DBZ to thank for the inspiration of the choice element for this creative idea, although the creation of these ideas is really all me. Had this man not created something as awesome as Yu-Gi-Oh! Then I would not have seen the dynamic that an entity like that can succeed alongside something like Pokemon. And a lot of people, when they think about Pokemon, they think about that being the main monster series that excels, but it's like Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually excelled in its own way, despite the fact that it also was a monster series. And when I thought about that, I was like, well, there's no reason why I wouldn't be able to do something very similar. On that note though, stay tuned. Now I want to go a little bit more into my favorites as it pertains to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. I want to talk about the different duelists, the monsters, everything in between 25 minutes to an hour, or however long it takes for me to record this podcast episode. Now I will say I've literally watched all the way up to the series V-Reigns or Vrains, I don't know how you say it. And I think I watched up to 15 episodes into that series as well. So I really had to break the list of my favorites down based off of each series, because each series was very different and had a lot of, very different elements that need to be talked about. So when it comes to the different series, they all were pretty good in their own way, and they all had a few flaws in their own way as well too. The original was a classic and it can't be beat. I even loved how the filler season, specifically I'm talking about the Orichalco season, which was season 4 of Yu-Gi-Oh! The original, that was epic too. The monsters were cool and the duelists were cool as well too. I think it set the tone and a format for all the series going forward, and it told a good story as well. I even liked the little ancient Egyptian touch and origin throughout it, although it was clearly gentrified, but that's neither here nor there, and we can get into that into another episode. First of all, I just got to say this though. I love the idea of these different characters having a Yami, in other words, a dark side, that had a totally different persona than the person who wielded the item that would activate the Yami. So in other words, I loved the Pharaoh, although he was a Yami for Yugi. Like, he was a darker personality, but ultimately he still was a hero. And I like the difference that you saw between the personality of the Pharaoh and the personality of Little Yugi. I love Joey as a character because he was a dope underdog and he was funny as shit. And him and Kaiba stayed roasting niggas the whole series, and even a handful of times they roasted each other. I like Seto Kaiba's character as well too, and how he added this overly serious straight shooter loner anti-hero type of character. So I would say Seto, the Pharaoh, and Joey were definitely my favorite characters. Pegasus was probably my favorite villain. I like Pegasus's sarcasm, and his effeminate behavior was funny as shit to me too. That shit had me in tears, and this dude was literally the most supreme cheater I think I've ever seen. I remember when he was fighting Kaiba, and Kaiba thought that he had done some damage to Pegasus, and Pegasus was sitting there pretending like he was about to lose, and he was like, oh no. When really, this dude was using his Millennium Eye to see Kaiba's cards. I was like, dog, he is the biggest cheater ever, man. So I gotta say though, I hated the character Taya, and I also hated bitch ass Weevil too. Those are probably my least favorite characters. My favorite match though throughout the whole series was Joey versus Yami Merrick, because let's be real, Joey whooped that ass, and had he not passed out before his card made a move, he would have beat Merrick, and that season really would have been over right then and there. But they dragged it on, so, you know, whatever. We got another cool match after that. But really, that Joey versus Yami Merrick match was kind of the tip of the iceberg, if I'm being honest with you, of that series as far as matches go. My favorite monsters were Blue Eyes White Dragon. You know, that's a cold dragon. Anybody who sees that dragon knows that dragon's cold. And it was strong as hell. The Black Luster Soldier, the Magician of Black Chaos, XYZ Dragon Cannon, the Revival Gem. I just thought it was really cool. I thought that its ability was cool too. And then the Egyptian Gods. I liked them all. My favorite moment in the series was in season 4, and I gotta tell y'all about this if you haven't seen this. And for those of you all who have seen this, it's just gonna be a reminder of some shit that you probably found funny too. So Pharaoh was fighting Weevil alone when he was using the Orichalcos, and Weevil played with Pharaoh's heartstrings a little bit. Because basically what happened was the Pharaoh kind of got into the situation where he was tempted to use the Orichalcos, and Yugi was trying to tell him, yo bro, you can't be using that because you know that thing is evil. And so Pharaoh was tempted, and at one point he shrugged Yugi's ass off, and he played the damn card anyway, and he ended up losing. He got his ass handed to him. I ain't gonna lie, the Pharaoh took a big ass L because Raphael, I think that's how you say his name, tagged that ass, y'all. He tagged that ass. Pharaoh was like face down on the ground and shit, and then he lost Yugi too because Yugi got trapped by the Orichalcos after that. But anyway, so Weevil, I think to a certain extent, knew all this. So what he did was he told the Pharaoh, I got Yugi here in this card, and in order for you to win, you're gonna have to beat me in order to get him back. And so I think at one point he held the card up to the Pharaoh and he just ripped it in half, just like no fucks given. And so Pharaoh goes, no, like he's like pissed the hell off that he would do this. He's distraught. And so then Weevil basically was laughing because he was like, you know, I played a prank on this fool. And then the Pharaoh was like, you're going to pay for that. And after that, I was like, oh shit, it's about to go down. So he used this card, right? And it was called Berserker Soul. And how Berserker Soul works is the Pharaoh can make a direct attack on Weevil no matter what, as long as he keeps pulling a monster card. But the minute he doesn't pull a monster card anymore, he has to throw out the entire rest of his deck. So this man Pharaoh, I'm not even kidding y'all, pulled out like 10 damn monsters and shit, and he was tearing this nigga Weevil apart. And he was like, and again, this isn't your lucky day. Let's see. Oh well. And at one point, me and my wife be laughing about this though. But at one point though, Taya's stupid ass like comes and tries to stop him, and she's like, Pharaoh, no. And then Pharaoh was still he was in his savage mode. He was like, get off of me. And he just shrugs this bitch Taya off. But anyway, that was my favorite moment. Last thing I want to point out though, I love the change in the intro songs for season 2 and season 3. Like how the tone and the way it sounded was way darker than the first season. I thought that was really cool, and really that was everything. I wish they really would have kept it though for season 4 and season 5, but they changed it back to the theme that they had in season 1, and I liked it because it really just gave it a darker edge, and it I don't know, it just sounded cooler. Now let's talk about GX for a little bit. GX probably, if I'm being realistic, storyline wise, was probably the best and most consistently written. It's a shame that they didn't make that last season in English though, because this show felt like a legit good spin-off of the original. They had a cool main character. They centered issues off of Duel Academy, specifically the one that Kaiba built, and the battles were very great. They were awesome. My favorite duelist was for sure Axel Brodie, and we gonna talk about him a little bit later down the line. But real brief, Axel Brodie basically was the first nigga, literally the first black person. When I say first nigga, the first black person who was a side character in the show to basically fold the damn main character who was white in anime history. The thing I loved about Axel too was that he was authentically black, and not only that, he was strong, masculine. His vernacular made him seem like he was actually a black man, but also not on some heavy ebonics type shit where, you know, it looked like it was some anti-black trope that was being thrown in there. It didn't feel that way, and he was an intellectual and technological genius. I did a post actually on this too on Instagram talking about how people sleep on Axel though, and he is a good character who represents black folks in anime a while back actually. And I just want to say this real quick. And at the time, the sister, and you know, I won't roast her too much because she cool, and I do like her as a person and support her content and the stuff that she comes out with, but I think she was a little confused. But she came on a post saying that there was no such thing as anti-blackness in Japanese culture with anime and all that, but it was more so in Chinese culture. And then she started talking about how civil rights leaders have confirmed this, and you know, that was a little goofy. Let's be real, that was a little goofy, but I'll address that in another podcast episode. Anyway, family, anti-blackness has vastly existed in all cultures, even in some black ones to a certain extent. Unfortunately, there aren't any exceptions when it comes to that. Seriously though, you can just Google the myriad of disrespectfully made characters that are black in Japanese anime and be overwhelmed, and it doesn't take long to find it. I'm just gonna be honest. Anyway, I'll leave that there, but back on subject of Axel, I made that post to show or remind people who knew of all the badly made black characters in Japanese anime that are out there. Somehow there's a shining light on the character known as Axel Brodie. Anyway, the other characters I like in GX were Zane Truesdale, Jaden Yuki, who was the main character, Aster Phoenix, Chaz, and Jesse. The monsters I liked were Elemental Hero Blade Edge. Neos was cool. He wasn't my favorite, but he was cool. Armed Dragon, Rainbow Dragon, Destiny Hero Dogma, Destiny Hero Plasma, Cyber End Dragon. I thought the best match, I'm going to be totally honest with you, was Zane versus the possessed version of Jesse. And in second place was Axel versus Supreme King. Those both were phenomenal matches. I was very, very, very impressed with the way they were done. I think the Zane one really pulled on my heartstrings because we knew that Zane was about to die, and that was like his last match, and he was fighting an opponent who he felt very passionate about fighting, and he went out and with a bang basically, and the only reason why he really died, if we think about it, is because his heart pretty much gave out. I think the whole match was just so well done, you know. And I like the Axel and Supreme King one because it was the first time that we saw Jaden in this more so bad guy role, because Jaden kind of had a heel turn, although he was the main character, and Axel was the dude who kind of took him down. My favorite villain was Yugioh because she was some shit to be fucked with. I'm just gonna be honest. And she turned Jaden's world upside down, although I will say Jaden was mad depressed throughout this whole season. Like, it added a dark layer to the story, but I was like, wow, dude was super depressed after he watched all his friends die and being told it was all his fault and all this other shit. And then of course there was that Supreme King thing. So yeah, it was all bad. And Yugioh was really responsible for a lot of that shit. And I don't know if this was my favorite moment, but in season 3, I was in my feelings really when, like I just said earlier, with Zane's death. That had me in my feelings. And the other thing I didn't like was that Jaden got all depressed after fighting that bitch ass Braun guy. I really didn't like that motherfucker Braun. Like, if you ever watch the series, you'll actually see what he's about and who he is. But basically, he's this asshole who was basically saying that Jaden was going to be an evil king and all this other stuff. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds was dope, and to me, low-key had the best monsters because I love that they had so many dragons. And anybody who knows me knows I'm a big dragon fan. I love seeing different types of dragons and people design different types of dragons. I just gotta say though, Yusei is that guy. This nigga didn't even lose not one duel. Like, they showed him in a flashback losing to Jack Atlas, but after that, in the main story, he did not lose not one duel that whole time. This dude was also immaculate. It's like he never made a mistake or did anything bad to anyone ever. He was just literally the nicest dude ever, and he wasn't like a pushover or anything. Like, I mean, he was a tough guy. He just was not an evil person by any means. Yusei was easily my favorite character in that series, although I also like Jack. My favorite monsters were 100 Eyes Dragon, Stardust Dragon, which was Yusei's lead, the Red Dragon Archfiend, he was cool, the Power Tool Dragon, the Black Rose Dragon, Lightning Tricorn was cool, and I also liked Nitro Warrior. And y'all gotta admit, Black Rose Dragon was a beautiful dragon. It really fit Akiza well too. And my favorite match, by the way, was a tie between Yusei versus Callan Kessler and Leo when he faced Aporia after his partners got knocked out in season 4. And, you know, with the Leo thing, they play Lil Buddy all through the series because he couldn't become a signer, only for him to literally become one after he basically done beat the final villain from the previous season by himself. I love the season 2 intro, by the way, for this series, when they had all them dark signers at the table in hoods and shit, and they kind of went through the table and you saw all the people who were sitting there. I thought that was really cool, and it kind of had a dark edge, and I think that's what made that very interesting for me. Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal was the first and only series of the bunch where I actually hated the protagonist. As a matter of fact, without Kite, it would have been more difficult to even move through this series. The storylines were good, but Yuma kept fucking it up. Yuma was annoying as shit, and he wasn't that great of a duelist. To me, he is in the main hero shit list, along with Korra and Ash Ketchum, if anybody who's listening knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, my favorite character was Kite without a doubt, and maybe Quattro being a distant second. The best monsters were Yuma's lead monster, Utopia. Like, I'm like, how this dude gonna be a damn goober, and then his lead monster is dope? I don't get that. And Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon was also what was my favorite monster as well, without a doubt. The best match once again was Kite when he faced Mazar in space. Shoot, matter of fact, let me be clear about something. Kite was one of my favorite characters though throughout all of the series combined, up there with Axel and Yusei and the Pharaoh. Dude lost only one match the entire series, and it wasn't even to Yuma. Matter of fact, he beat Yuma and then tied him even after Yuma activated the super form just to fight him. Yuma was the first duelist to just constantly get folded by the anti-hero. Anyway, if you can get beyond Yuma, then this is a decent show too, with a good storyline and cool villains. And I do like Zexal 2's intro song better, but I will say that I hated the song for the original Zexal. But I did like the little picture that they showed, the little video that they showed in season 2 of Zexal when they had the 3 brothers, which was Quattro, Trey, and Quentin, right before they showed Vetrix. I like that intro the most from the first part of Zexal, because they split Zexal into Zexal 1 and Zexal 2. And Zexal 1's song though kind of sucked. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it was my least favorite song actually. Arc 5, Arc V, I don't know what the hell you call it, was cool, but it was a show that had the potential to be phenomenal. I like the ideas where they brought back characters from these other series like Aster Phoenix, Alexis Rhodes, Crow, Jack Atlas, and Kite. I think one very big miss, though, was what happened with Zane Truesdale. So basically, he was mentioned as an actual character in this series, and honestly, he should have been an active part of the story. The theory I heard is that he was aligned with the fusion world, obviously, because he was in GX, and he tried to colonize the other worlds along with everybody else in the fusion world. And Zane was actually the leader, and Kite actually killed him off. And I've just got to say, that is the biggest missed opportunity. Why in the hell didn't they have Kite face Zane and us actually see this match? It just, I was mystified that he wasn't a character. Anyway, the monsters I liked were Fright for Chimera. He was creepy, but he was dope. The Raid Raptor, the Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, and Odd Eyes was cool too. My favorite duelists were Shay, Kite, obviously, Sora, Declan, and Yugioh. By the way, I just gotta say, I feel like Sora was a perfectly made character, y'all. You have this cute kid who was walking around eating a damn lollipop all the time like he was sweet and innocent and shit, just to find out that he had a dark side. Then the monster he had went perfect too. It started off being this little teddy bear, then it turned into this kind of creepy bigger bear, and then it turned into Fright for Chimera, and that thing was strong as shit. I was like, man, he got a dope ass monster. I couldn't believe the show put this character though together as well as they did. It was just really well done. The best match, though, I think, was the match between Yugioh and Silvio. And the second best match was Dennis McFields versus Shay Obsidian. And this was when they were in the 5Ds world. Again, though, I want to reiterate, this show was very good in theory and its ideas, but it could have been written a little differently. They also spent way too much time in the Synchro and 5Ds world than they should have. And the last thing I wanted to say about favorites is I haven't seen much of the 6th series outside of a handful of battles yet, but I already do like the character Varys, I ain't gonna lie. Now I want to talk a little bit about the character Axel Brodie and also the fan fiction idea that I came up with, because I think y'all are gonna like this. So Axel Brodie is a character that I like so much, I gotta give credit to this creator and big up him for properly representing a black character so well. Of all the shows in anime, comic media, and regular media, you just don't see properly represented black characters. And anime especially is a danger zone filled with anti-black narratives. And I had a brief conversation with this brother who has a podcast called The Well-Spoken Token. And shout out to that brother too. He's real cool. He's real cool. He seems like he's doing a pretty good job with his podcast too. But anyway, he made a comment that I completely agree with when discussing anti-blackness in Japanese culture. And I think he said, and I don't know if this is exact, but it's in the ballpark, he doesn't expect Japanese culture to properly represent us, although he notices that it's a thing. And my thing is, he's right. He's 100% right. But the thing I always try to stress is it's not about expecting proper representation from someone outside of your culture, but more that we call these things out when we see them, and it gives us fuel to say other cultures don't have our backs. And then we can go out there and make our own content, and we can show that when we see these false narratives from cultures that don't depict us properly, we can say, hey, here's our reason why we went and we did our own thing. Look how they portray us in other spaces. If you look at characters like Mr. Popo, or even just the normal black characters that they have on anime shows like DBZ, they look like blackface depictions. And usually their skin will be all dark and their lips will be either big and red or pink, and they'll be looking all crazy. I say all that to say Axel Brodie is the needle in the haystack of black characters, with the haystack being nothing but anti-blackness. Again, the man is unique. He sported his own gear outside of the West Academy outfits that the others had. He had his own dual disc that actually looked like a gun. He sounded like a black man, and I think an actual black voice actor played him as well too. I believe the brother's name was Dwayne Cooper. And again, I just want to reiterate this. He was a masculine and intelligent black man. And one might try to say something like, Wasn't he tech support though, man? And I would say, if you look at him, he proved that he could beat Jaden because somebody would then go back and say, he was helping Jaden with the technology. Wouldn't that make him tech support, man? And I would say literally, like he showed he was able to beat Jaden twice. So yes, he did help him with tech, but he was able to beat him twice. He proved that. He's not just an incompetent sidekick or a weak or buck-broken sidekick. And because of all this, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I thought about making a fan fiction Yu-Gi-Oh manga about this dude. But of course, I would need the right people to be put in place to help me out with this and, and the bread for it as well, too. The idea would be called Yu-Gi-Oh! Blaxel. And of course, the star of it would be Axel Brodie. He would be described as a black man with a serious nature and the leader of a tech hub that makes dual weapons. And also trains individuals to be able to use them as if they are warriors in combat. After graduating West Academy a few years later, he decided to go back to the US where he is from and goes there to build up the old neighborhood he used to live in with his parents before they moved. He goes back to a city called Black City, located in the state of Illinois. In this rundown hood, he builds his own black-owned corporation called the ABC Brawl Academy. With this business, he creates an entirely new system of dueling called Brawl Duels. He got the idea from his father, who was a mercenary, and also trained him as a mercenary as well, too. By the way, I just want to say this was actually stated in the description that this was his origin, in the actual GX description. He created this business knowing what was at stake and wanting to rectify all the wrongs that were going down in his old hood. Brawl Duels were essentially physical battles that participants can take place in that require them to physically fight or use weapons to fight with. During a brawl duel, a time limit is set depending on the card that is used. And depending on the strength, agility, and defense of the actual duelist who is in the brawl mode, certain attacks done to the other opponent can result in more or less life points being lost in the time period. Cards can be pulled during the brawl duel to enhance attributes of the brawl duelers and also give them weapons during the brawl. Throughout the series, Axel often reflects on the things his father, Axel Brodie the first, would tell him. He continues to wield a volcanic monster deck as he previously did in the GX series. His look is mostly the same, except now he sports locks tied and put in the back of his head. Axel has a team at his academy, which include Tyrone Sterling, his best friend who is humorous and fun-loving, but also is still trying to get the hang of being a serious duelist. He is described as a slender, brown-skinned black man who is wearing a black tank top, has braids, and wears blue jeans. He typically has what would be called a hip-hop deck. Then there's Erica Lancaster, the certified medic who has a secret dueling ability that many don't know about. She serves at some point as Axel's love interest. She is a beautiful dark-skinned black woman with natural curly hair who had a heart monster deck. Then there's the character Stone Mason, a duelist who is known as one of the strongest and toughest in the academy, uses a stone monster deck, and is a certified musclehead who is also about brawn over brains. There's Cameron Jones, a young man from the streets with a tough exterior and demeanor who was sent to the academy to turn his life around. He typically wields a Doom monster deck. Marcus Welsing is also another character, and he is the card creator that helps, who keeps to himself, but seems to have a mysterious past he doesn't speak much about. There are other duelists and characters that present themselves throughout the series, but these are the characters who are in the organization. Axel has an arch nemesis, however, who attempts to get his business shut down while working with the BCP, the Black City Police. His name is Percival Viper, and he is the long-lost son of Thelonious Viper, who joined Duel Academy after he heard about the disappearance and death of his father. If you guys watch GX, Thelonious Viper was the villain of the first part of the third season, who came from West Academy and tried to basically revive his son and was still in folks' energy. He wanted to make a name for himself, but he had a lot of jealousy because Thelonious treated Axel like a son, being the top duelist at the academy. He goes back to Illinois after he finds out that Axel has left Japan as well and tries to send the police after his academy. Percival is a muscular, light-skinned black man of average height who resembles his father Thelonious and wears a purple suit and tie. He is clean cut and has an upstanding, proper way of behaving. He has a purple venom deck. Outside of the academy, there is a stripper mercenary who works at a strip club called the Rose Garden in the most dangerous part of town. In the strip club is a duelist named Diamond Showers, who is known as the Diamond in the Rough. She is known for reeling in the most dangerous criminals in town and taking their possessions in duels, and she does this for her own gain. She becomes intertwined in the story when one of the Academy's members and Cameron go to the strip club together and get reeled in by her. She then finds out the Academy has a lot of troubled people training there and a lot of other weapons there as well too, and tries to capitalize on this opportunity. Diamond is a beautiful light-skinned black woman with light blue contacts and a light blue diamond pattern one-piece suit with light blue hair and dark blue lipstick. When she strips, she wears a mask, because she doesn't want to be identified. She has a diamond deck that she battles with. The main issue, however, is where Black City is being taken over by a notorious gang called the Scythe. They came around with the mission to harass, assault, and steal cards from all the other duelists in the city, therefore selling special cards to take over and do whatever they want. The leader is a man named Carvel Macon, who had an interesting yet ominous backstory rooted in criminal violence and previous gang affiliations. Carvel does this with his henchmen, Jagged Jordan, the X, and the Blade Queen. Carvel is an older black gentleman with a black turtleneck and a gold chain. He has on gray slacks and has a small cut underneath his eye. He also has a gold pocket knife he carries around with him as well too, and he typically wields a gold deck. In the story, Axel trains his members to fight off the likes of those such as Carvel who want to take over the city and turn it upside down. All right, y'all, so that was the episode, and that was the fan fiction idea that I have for a potential Yu-Gi-Oh! Axel Brodie spin-off to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you, if I get more interest, I guess, I wouldn't mind like talking about this a little bit more, especially with somebody who is into, drawing manga and whatnot. I would definitely be interested in talking to somebody about that. But anyway, y'all, I hope you enjoyed this whole episode and heard everything that I had to say. I definitely will be having a lot more to come. So continue to stay tuned and continue to support me. Anyway, I hope y'all have a good day, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.